Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who still don't know this space, which is not good if you don't, this is Upward Hartford, the innovation hub / co-working space / corporate rental space that is really the heartbeat of innovation and entrepreneurship in downtown Hartford. You're now standing in a space that we're about to build out a few more training spaces, big conference rooms, because the corporate community loves our space so much, and we cannot deal with the demand. We have, as some of you may know already, 5 rooms on the 17th floor, and companies, amazing companies like Cigna is already here, permanent training space. So we're building more, we're bringing in more startups on the other side, are working consistently, 10 startups in our Upward Labs program and many other companies on the other side. This looks, the activity today in this space, and with Galaxy, it's been incredible. Such incredible people and the new workforce they're bringing. This looks like any co-working space innovation hub in New York or Silicon Valley, and we're there already. There's literally no more work to do. So thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to introduce these amazing people, and we're so lucky to have you guys here to make your wonderful announcements. I would like to introduce our Lieutenant Governor, amazing Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bysowitz, or as I just learned, Byshevitz. So
close, yeah. Thank you.
Please, Susan.
Thank you. Shauna, thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you so much for hosting us here at Upward Hartford. The governor and I have each visited here several times to see the great startups and the incredible work that's being done right here to bring young people and new and exciting businesses to Hartford and to Connecticut. The work that is being done here is a combination of change makers. We've got investors, there are tech startups, all kinds of exciting businesses. So we're really happy to be here. I can think of no better place for the governor and our team to announce a package of reforms that we've got, which we are going to put before the legislature to make sure that we grow our economy and we increase our competitiveness in Connecticut. These incentives, which you're going to hear a little bit more about in a minute, are going to support growing our businesses in Connecticut while also reducing risk to our taxpayers. The plans that we have will help encourage businesses to expand and relocate to Connecticut, as well as strengthening the growth of the small businesses that we already have here with our Small Business Express 2.0, and the commissioner is going to be talking about how the business climate in Connecticut has changed in a very positive way, and we're going to be changing our Small Business Express program to reflect that. So we remain very focused on efforts that are going to develop our workforce. Just today, the Governor's Workforce Council is meeting later to discuss and refine our workforce development strategies. We have a lot of exciting news about our 2020 goals. So to speak further in more depth is our very talented DECD Commissioner, David Lamont. David.
Thank you. Thank you very much. When you said talented, I thought you were talking about Glenn, but I appreciate you introducing me.
She's amazingly talented.
We have our talented Deputy Commissioner, Glenn Thames, who spearheaded a lot of what I'm about to talk about. First off, Shauna, thank you very much for hosting us again. It's great to be here almost a year after my first time at Upward Labs, and it's phenomenal to hear that business is going well. So I wanted to do 3 things. First, I want to talk a bit about the economy and the current environment in Connecticut. Second, talk a bit about 2019, what we did at DECD and what we've learned. And then thirdly, and most importantly, talk about the initiatives, what we're proposing changing as we go forward as it relates to Connecticut, in particular for incentives. First off, on the economy, and I'm going to touch on this briefly, economic growth in the picture, I think, has gotten a lot better. And I think, candidly, it's a lot better than many people in Connecticut want to give the economy credit for. So if you look at the recent numbers, GDP in the third quarter was at 2.1%, which is in line with the country. And if you look for fiscal year or full year 2019 as a whole, we're tracking right at the median of the U.S. And that's not where we've been as a state over the past 10 years, but it looks like 2019, and we'll learn the final numbers in April, but it looks like the numbers will be a lot better than what we've seen empirically. If you look at income growth, which is really important for our residents, 2019 is tracking around 3.5% increase in income. The country's around 4.5%, so we need to do better there. But if you look, Connecticut has some of the highest incomes already in the nation. So one of the challenges for us is how do we continue to grow incomes as fast or faster than the nation? And really that comes down to good paying, high productivity jobs and making sure that we're enabling that environment. It really goes to innovation. So that's really critical for us to make sure that we keep growing incomes as fast as the country. And then lastly, job growth. Job growth, the state of Connecticut's been growing jobs roughly 30 to 40 basis points in terms of our labor force in the private sector per year. We did that again in 2019. The country's doing a little over 1%. So this is where we do need to increase. But in my mind, this comes to innovation in the right environment. But this also means attracting population, retaining more of our high school and college graduates, and making Connecticut a great place to migrate from other states. So more on that a bit later, but there's significant opportunities to grow our jobs, but to do that we need to grow our population because the labor market in Connecticut is roughly in line with the country in terms of unemployment rate, just a touch higher. Shifting to 2019 and what we've learned, one of the top priorities of the Lamont-Bysewicz administration is having a very strong, engaged, and constructive relationship with business. So to that end, since I was named commissioner, I've met with hundreds of businesses, municipal leaders, as well as Chamber of Commerce to really understand their economic development priorities, where the state can be a helpful partner to them. I've also been involved with over 10 business roundtables and small groups meetings with specific industries and geographies to understand the needs of different parts of the state and different industries which are in the state. One of the things, or a few of the things that we learned from all of them were really four things I would say. First and foremost, lack of tax certainty and fiscal stability came up in almost every meeting. To get significant investment in the state of Connecticut, we need to provide long-term tax certainty because that's a precondition to this significant investment. Secondly, our aging infrastructure and poor and congested transportation was a very consistent theme. A best-in-class economy requires best-in-class infrastructure. Thirdly, workforce, in particular STEM-related workforce and manufacturing-related workforce. And Commissioner Westby's here, and he'll talk a bit more about that. We have the Governor's Workforce Council. But Connecticut has long had one of the best workforces in the nation. We need to continue to maintain that edge and have the most work-ready population in the country. And the last thing which came up a lot is the lack of a large, vibrant, densely populated city. And this is something I feel particularly strongly about. If you look at where the significant job creation in the country has happened over the past decade, the vast majority of it has been in the cities. So we need to make sure that we make critical investments in our cities in Connecticut to enable that job creation, to attract that job creation, because that's where the market is going. It has gone, and I think it will continue to go. We need to make sure that we adapt and we can compete in that game. So, for example, where we are in Hartford, this is phenomenal. This is just what we need to do, but how can we do this on an even bigger scale to attract that investment? The last comment we heard was around incentives, and I'll talk a bit more about what we're changing in a second, but the state has had two main incentive tools, one, the Manufacturing Assistance Act, and secondly, Small Business Express. And we got a variety of feedback on these programs, but on the Manufacturing Assistance Act, it was suggested that we could potentially incentivize jobs at a lower expense and a lower risk to taxpayers. We didn't need to give out the money and create a level playing field, picking winners that we were doing previously. And on Small Business Express, the lending environment has changed significantly since the Great Recession. Is there a more efficient, more targeted way that the state of Connecticut can make sure capital gets to our small and growing businesses? So shifting now to 2020 and talking about what we're going to propose and work with the legislature to change these programs, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to shift the Manufacturing Assistance Act to what we're calling the Job CT program. So that's going to be a transparent, performance-based, and very targeted program where companies that are going to grow 25 or more jobs in the state of Connecticut can earn a benefit for creating that new employment, and it'll be a percentage of the income that comes off those jobs that they will benefit by. But the benefit of this is it's going to be very clear to everyone in the state and outside of the state what the benefit will be to a company for growing jobs here. Some of the other benefits, we're going to do significantly less bonding. If you look at DECD over the past 12 months, there's been a 70% reduction in bonding. So that's $140 million that would have been on the credit card of the state that your kids and your grandkids would have to pay. That is no longer there. So this does not require bonding. In addition, we anticipate being able to pay less per job. Empirically, if you look, the state was paying roughly $16,000 per job in some of its programs. We think the new programs, the cost will be between $5,000 and $10,000. The last thing I'd mention here in this program, we are going to incentivize job growth in our opportunity zones and in our biggest cities. So to the extent you create that same job in a city like Hartford, the benefit to the employer is going to be twice the amount if you weren't in a city or an opportunity zone. So a lot more details to come on that, but we think that's providing the right incentives and the right balance between benefits to business and the cost and risk to taxpayers. Just moving on, Small Business Express. The state was a very large small business lender, but if you look at the numbers since 2011, small business lending has increased by 70% just in the banking community, in addition to online and other non-bank lenders coming into the market. So what we're really focused on doing now is two things. One, we're going to shift from being a direct lender to working with private lenders, to not compete with banks, but to figure out if we can increase capacity by working alongside banks. There's an existing program called the Capital Access for Business, or CAB program. We're going to look to utilize that program with some tweaks and really work with banks to increase their lending where the state could share some risk with those banks. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, where the state is looking to play a role still in the direct lending, and we're going to do this through a community development fund, is really target minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, inner cities, veteran-owned businesses, disabled. We really want to focus on areas where it's clear the capital isn't getting to the good ideas to create the jobs that are so necessary. So we're going to focus our resources there and then utilize the broad banking sector to touch the overall market. So a lot more to come on that, but I think that you're going to see a significant reduction in bonding and a lot more efficiencies from this new small business program where we're really looking to, again, partner with the private sector as opposed to compete with the private sector. So we believe those two proposals strike the right balance, which is important. We want to incentivize business and create the right environment for business. That is critical, but we also need to be mindful that Connecticut taxpayers are on the other side of these incentives. So making sure that we have the right balance between the taxpayer return on investment, which is critical, and what's going to make businesses invest. That's really what we're trying to do here with these legislative proposals. So thanks for that, and I'll turn it back to Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, thank you so much. And now I'd like to bring up Commissioner Kurt Westby. We know the biggest challenge for our economy is developing the right workforce, and he's on it. Commissioner Westby.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Bysowicz, and good morning. We are on it. Economic development in Connecticut, high on the list. I think the biggest thing that's happened from the end of last year and coming into this new year is the reconstituted Governor's Workforce Council, which is the Workforce Development Board here in the state of Connecticut. First, thanks for the leadership of Garrett Moran in putting it all together, and we're going to be talking with him in a couple hours all about that. The question is, what is the framework? The framework for this new look at how workforce development is going to be done is employer-driven, industry sector-based, skills-based, and data-driven. This approach will meet the employment demand needs for the state of Connecticut. It's a spot-on formula, in my opinion, for success, and it's been demonstrated in a lot of other states, such as Colorado. It has the promise to transform how we do workforce development for the better, how we get more actors on the same page. Why do I say this? Because we have the same model already up and running, and it's called the Eastern Workforce Development Board Pipeline Training Program, which is a feeder for EB and hundreds of its subcontractors. It's employer-driven, industry sector-based, skills-based, and data-driven, and it has met EB employment needs here in the state of Connecticut. It's been successful. 1,400 skilled jobs have been filled in Southeast Connecticut, many from the ranks of the unemployed and dislocated. Proof. If you look at U.S. manufacturing employment growth in the last 5 years, it's been 5%. Not too bad, but not so great. If you look at Connecticut employment growth in the last 5 years, I'm talking cumulative, 2.7, half. If you look at New London, Norwich growth, which is the area where EB and most of its subcontractors are located, that employment growth in manufacturing has been 14.2%. And a big part of that 14.2% is based on the pipeline that's been operating there for the last 4 years. It's been so successful that we replicated this model now in New Haven and Waterbury. It's called the Apprentice Connecticut Initiative, and that was passed by legislation a couple years ago. This will place 2,000 more workers into advanced manufacturing jobs in months, not years. So what is the basis of the Apprentice Connecticut Initiative? Apprenticeships. Why? Because they are, back to what I was saying earlier, employer-driven, industry sector-based, skills-based, and data-driven. Employers decide what curriculum is necessary and what work-based learning programs will continue upon employment. Pre-apprenticeships bridge the local high schools, the local colleges, and ultimately the workplace itself as a linear continuum. That hasn't existed before. So apprenticeships can be useful in creating a structured, consistent, predictable training trajectory in occupations that lack one. I'll give you a couple examples. Hartford Healthcare and Yale Hospital Network now have a registered apprenticeship program for medical coding. Yale recently expanded its RN apprenticeship program and has significantly reduced their medical errors as a result. There are jobs in IT that would benefit from an industry-recognized training program. The insurance and banking industries in Connecticut have already embraced apprenticeship, starting with the Hartford Insurance Group and Liberty Bank. So with the revamped Governor's Workforce Council and proven employer-driven models, I'm bullish on meeting Connecticut's workforce needs in all sectors and growing the economy. We're thrilled to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, thank you so much. There is a lot of really great news for Hartford and our state, and I'm delighted to bring up Tim Bryan, who is the CEO of Galaxy, for some exciting news.
Governor, thank you. Governor, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I have been invited here to share a secret, and so I'll get to that in just a moment. Our company on background builds business solutions, much of which is around healthcare, much of which is using automation, methodology, services, and people to unlock value. And there is a very amazing secret going on. The next iteration of healthcare is emerging from Hartford, Connecticut. That is, to this point, been a secret, and now it's coming to the fore. And the reason for that is very clear. You have an entire generation of therapies being created in the United States today, many of which are going to eradicate diseases. That's an incredible opportunity. The companies in this sector, like, for example, our partner Cigna, are currently building capability to dispense those therapies. And there's all kinds of opportunities to figure out who's going to need these therapies, where they're going to be, what it's going to cost to dispense them, all of which is a data-driven opportunity. And it means that people's health will be improved. It means that the cost of care will go down. It means that technology will bring innovation to this sector and help save lives and make people's lives better. That's going on right here in Hartford, Connecticut. Our program is called Outsource to Hartford, and we are here in recognition of the business opportunity to build IT-based systems here in Hartford. And there are reasons for that, and very straightforward reasons. The governor, the mayor, business leaders are all aligned on the renaissance of Hartford. You're looking at opportunity all around you. You're looking at affordable real estate, you're looking at great restaurants, you're looking at great companies, and most importantly, you're looking at exciting work. We are competing nationally and internationally for talent. We have the obligation to keep all the talented people in Connecticut here in Hartford. We have the obligation and the opportunity to attract people to Hartford and Connecticut. We have the opportunity to take individuals that may be displaced from our workforce and retrain them, to give them good, viable jobs, and in our case, in technology-based systems. So if you put these things together and you understand that you have an incredible moment in time, Galaxy is here as a business because that moment is upon us right now. We are committed to hiring at a minimum 200 people in our facilities here in Hartford. We're currently looking to buy a building here in Hartford. We intend to make a significant investment and an ongoing investment in this area, and the reason is that what we do in terms of helping companies understand the data that they have and putting it to work to understand who may get sick, putting it to work to understand what it will take to make those people well, what it will cost to make them well. Putting those things together really almost for the first time and delivering a better quality of life for Americans and ultimately the world, emanating from Hartford, Connecticut. That, to this point, has been a secret. It's not a secret anymore. And we're going to be attracting people to help us in this mission. I'm thrilled that the governor and the lieutenant governor and everyone here recognizes this opportunity and has made all kinds of commitments to helping Hartford achieve its vision of being a leader in this space and continuing its economic revitalization. And we're thrilled to be part of it. When I sat down with the governor a few months ago and we talked about this, he was very, I think he felt energized because someone in the private sector like me and some of my clients share his vision for Hartford. I believe quite strongly that that's an essential component to turning a city like Hartford around and continuing the revitalization of Connecticut. So the message from Galaxy Solutions is we chose Hartford. We launched Outsource to Hartford because it is good business to be here, and the things that are going on here technologically are incredibly exciting. And so the message coming from here today out to the world is look at Hartford. Consider Hartford for your technology job. Consider Hartford for your programming job. Consider Hartford for your high-tech job because it is coming back, and it's coming back strong.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So one of the reasons that Connecticut's economy is on the upswing is because our governor has a vision and has been implementing that vision, which includes fiscal stability and predictability, workforce development, transportation infrastructure investment, and vibrant cities. And it's my pleasure to introduce our governor, Ned Lamont.
First of all, Tim, welcome to Hartford. Welcome to Connecticut. We're proud that you're calling this home. And it's perfect that you're doing it right here at Upward Hartford. Shana knows we keep coming back here. I love this. This is my world. I mean, over there in the Capitol building, everybody always says, how come you're not wearing a tie? It says, because I love this community. I love the entrepreneurship and energy, and this is just the way we work it. I love the fact that the number of startups I meet on the way in and out of here. And Tim, this is why you're going to feel so comfortable starting here. I think he understates a little bit how important Galaxy Solutions is, what we're doing, not just here in Connecticut, but beyond. As he says, transforming healthcare, 20% of our economy, is going to take place right in Hartford. And that's because we have not only some of the best hospitals in the world, we also have leaders when it comes to health insurance companies. And we have more entrepreneurial startups between Jackson down to Yale, New Haven, up to UConn in terms of technology and how that's transforming healthcare. But what Galaxy provides are the analytics, bringing the horsepower of telecommunications and IT to the healthcare space. And something that's been, we've been a little slow on that, and you have not, and you are jump-starting that. And what Tim says in terms of how we transform medicine, how we transform delivery of pharma, how we target it in terms of personalized medicine, working closely as he does right now with Cigna and Express Scripts. This is the transformation, and I think it starts in Hartford, and I think Tim does as well, which is one of the reasons Galaxy is right here. I'll tell you, talking to David and Kurt, we are trying to change the way we work with companies in this state. Over the last period of time, maybe we didn't have a great relationship day in and day out on a personal basis with the companies here in this state. I introduced David Lamont right here about a year ago, and I think he's met with every major mid-sized employer in this state going forward. And as he talked about, we're also trying to change the nature of the partnership between the state and business. In the old days, maybe it was, here's a grant, here's a bucket of money, come and deliver, and if it doesn't work, I claw it back. You invest in Connecticut, and we invest in you. And that's what the incentives that David was talking about means. After you've been here a period of time, we give you extra incentives to continue to grow and expand, especially in those communities which are most left behind. Rather than just, throwing out grant money, we're going to work with the banks to guarantee loans. So it's a partnership, public-private, between us and the banks. Similar, if you remember early on when we got together with the banks and guaranteed loans when we thought that a lot of federal employees were going to be losing their employment. That's the nature of how we're trying to change this relationship. As Kurt talked about, another thing that's our job is to make sure you have the talent you need. Make sure that you can recruit and hire. You do a lot of training right here. Right upstairs is where we first sat down with a company called Infosys and the IT training that they provide and helping to modernize our insurance business and others and bring them into the 21st century. And that's just what Tim and Galaxy Solution is going to be providing in terms of the analytics, starting in healthcare and beyond. And Tim, I just got to say on a personal basis, and I feel the same way as a business person, I love your passion for Hartford. I mean, you said it's a business decision. It's a smart business decision, and this is why you're here. But you also have a heart. And Galaxy Solutions has a heart. I know what you have done in Detroit. And you could have gone a lot of places. And what that made is a difference in terms of people and helping that city get back on its feet. And we're pretty far along. We're doing pretty well here in Hartford. But the commitment of folks like you, what that means in terms of the spirit of a city like this, just not the skill set you're bringing, is something we're going to remember as we work together every day for a long time to come. Thanks, everybody.
Well, we're so pleased to have so many members of the media here, so we'll take questions if you've got any.
Jobs, part of the issue with the previous administration's First Five program, for example, was how they defined jobs. Some businesses were able to get incentives because, the landscapers that plowed their driveways in the winter were counted as employees. So how will these jobs be counted? How will they be defined? Will they be full-time jobs?
Yes. Yeah, well, FTEs is what we're focused on. We're still working through the details of how we define it. So full-time employees, that's what we're going to be focused on. And importantly, we're really going to be targeted in sectors that grow the economy.
But some of those jobs were like, well, you could count two people as one person. Is it going to be one job
if there's 2 part-time jobs that equal 1 full-time employee, that will count, but there's not going to be double counting of jobs.
Commissioner, it seems like the governor was saying, or Governor, you can answer this, that in the old days, we'd give you these incentives up front, and then you would come, and you had to fulfill them. Now it sounds like you're saying, well, just come, and then we'll give you incentives later. So how does that end up costing per employee less?
Well, I guess 2 things there, Mark. One, the concept is what you mentioned, which is the jobs are created and then the economic benefit back to the employer happens after that over a 5 or 7 year period. So we are reducing the cost of that payout versus what was previously envisioned, but also the risk is on the company as opposed to the taxpayer. So there's no need to claw back. If, for example, in year 3 or year 4, the company goes away or things change, the benefit to the company is going to stop at that point.
In the first place, then, if you didn't say, hey, you know, we can give you a lot of breaks here.
Well, we're going to compete on our merits. Incentives are going to be part of the calculus, but we don't want to just keep competing on price. That's a losing proposition. We want to compete because of our healthcare, because of our workforce, our quality of life, our education. There's going to be a big focus on innovation in our cities in particular. That's how we want to compete. If a company's coming here just because we're giving them the biggest check, in my opinion, I've had a lot of these conversations over the past 12 months, it's not the right fit in the first place.
One of the favor of just what the commissioner just said, there's talk about essentially a non-compete pact among the states, and specifically on what he was just talking about in New England, maybe covering 6 states. What is your position on that?
I'm very supportive. We're hosting all the regional states coming up later this summer. That's on our agenda. I'll be down in Washington, D.C. in about a week. We don't want to sit around just handing out money to get a company to go across the border. That doesn't help Gina in Rhode Island. It doesn't help me in Connecticut. And I agree 100% with what David said. We've spent too much time. Every company would come to us and say, what are you going to do for us? How much the league going to be? Companies here in the state were going, hey, I've been here for 40 years. What's in it for me? This is an amazing state. We've got greatest quality of education. We're doing workforce, stabilizing the fiscal situation. I want to lead with the strengths that make Connecticut an amazing place for you to start your business. Then over time, if you continue to meet your requirements, if you continue to grow and expand, you've got a partner there. You invest in us, we invest in you.
What are the concrete to Governor Cuomo and your colleagues to push this along?
Yes.
What are the concrete things you can point to that are going to make the cities, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, so forth, more attractive to millennials, for the workforce, and to businesses?
Well, I'll start. I mean, how about really great, good-paying jobs that are right here? You know, outsourced to Hartford. Look at the number of jobs that Infosys has already created, good-paying jobs. See what that meant in terms of Aetna and other companies saying, hey, I'll take a second look at Hartford. This is really a good place to be. If I have access to the best talent in the world, I will stay here. Along with jobs comes housing and retail and nightlife and all the things that bring a city back to life.
Let me ask it another way. What is your administration doing? In Hartford, we have quasi-public authority, CERTA, which with state money is leveraging a lot of private investment into housing, but it does require state funding. So in that respect, what is your administration doing as far as providing, for example, further funding to CERTA to continue that work?
Well, I think you saw in the last bond commission meeting, we did hundreds of millions in affordable housing, targeted affordable housing. Every employer I talk to says, it's great that you got all these jobs. Is there a place for my folks to live? Is there a place that they can live that's affordable? And that's where the state steps in and plays a role, and we are going to play our role.
Governor, can I build on has this question? Commissioner Lehman said one of the groups we want to attract are graduates with the STEM degrees, the science, technology, engineering, math. But we just repealed an income tax credit to attract these STEM graduates in the new budget. Was that a mistake?
No, look what we're doing in terms of STEM. Look what we're doing in terms of education. You know, we said K through 12, we fully funded it. We put in place incentives so that the teachers develop the coding skills. Look, the Romance languages of the 21st century are coding skills. That's what we're doing.
To keep the STEM graduates working here. This tax incentive was to keep them working here afterward. We took that away. That would have saved them $20 million a year in the next couple of years.
Well, I can ask Kurt and David to talk about what we're doing in terms of recruiting, training, and making sure the STEM graduates stay right here.
So just to answer your question, Keith, in my opinion, this comes down to creating the attractive environment where the companies want to be, and ultimately if the companies are there, the jobs are there, the STEM graduates are going to be there as well.
What's the role for the state? That's what I guess what I'm getting at. Like Paz was saying, is there something the state should be doing with its dollars?
Well, I think Paz mentioned, and I sit on the CERTA board as a function of my role in DCD. I'm a big proponent of what CERTA is doing and basically filling that gap where there is one to create more residential. The Hartford residential market's gotten a lot tighter, and we need to see more people living here. Hartford needs to be an 18-hour city, not just a 9-to-5 city. That's really critical. So I think making sure that we're making smart investments, working with CERTA, affordable housing, and then I mentioned in the new program we're rolling out as it relates to business incentives, you will have twice the benefit. An employer will have twice the benefit to locate that same job in downtown Hartford versus in suburban Hartford. And that is critical because we want to make sure good paying jobs are here. That is a key component to getting the economy going.
But the other thing, Keith, is this Small Business Express 2.0 is going to target women-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned businesses in urban areas, which there is where you need capital. Heretofore, we haven't had enough of it, and the Small Business Express program is going to focus on that instead of the way it would statewide when, access to credit and capital back in 2008 was really hard. We don't have that problem, so now we're going to use that funding to target urban areas.
Just to underscore that point, for the state to truly succeed, Hartford can't have a 5.5% unemployment rate and close to 30% poverty when the state has a 3.7% unemployment rate and roughly 10% poverty. We need to make sure that we lift incomes in our cities and make sure that growth is inclusive. That's when you're going to have Connecticut at its best. So making sure, like the Lieutenant Governor said, we target our resources, our capital, our priorities at these cities, I think the whole state wins.
This is going to be the gist of your speech next week. This is your first proposal, this package?
Well, this is certainly going to be part of the speech. We're going to focus like a laser beam on economic growth. David gave you the numbers of where we've been over the last generation. Things maybe are turning around. It's early to say. Talking about a reset relationship with the business community, talking about the incentives and all the things that we can do, and talking about an economy that leaves no one behind. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to Hartford, when it comes to talking about making sure we lift everybody up. Rahm Emanuel says, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. I tell you, a pretty good economy is a terrible thing to waste as well. This is our chance to give people that opportunity.
Governor, Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport are never going to be Boston or New York. But the advantage here is that it is cheaper than Boston and New York. So isn't that really what you need to focus on?
Look, it's smaller than Boston and New York, if you're saying that. But look, Yale, New Haven, it's 40% less price than that lab space or that housing in Boston. You have an incredible job market right there. You've got great intellectual engines in terms of the university systems, what they're doing here. A lot of that same momentum is coming to a place like Hartford. You look at the you look at the housing listing sites for Boston, Hartford is one of the first places they're looking at right now because of the savings and because of the opportunity.
What will your administration be doing? What can your administration do to advance your goals here without necessarily going to the legislature? You're proposing, I guess this is going to be a legislative proposal, but I'm also wondering what can your administration do on its own to, revamp business incentives and the Small Business Express program?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we do want to and need to work with the legislature on these proposals. The new rebate structure, the Job CT program, that's important. The legislature embraces that. Through the existing MAA program, we could structure a grant that looks very similar, but I think it's important that we get the legislature's buy-in on this new proposal in terms of reduced cost, reduced risk, and the transparency. On Small Business Express, we also need an amendment in that program to change the loan program for the new market.
Have you already reached out to members of the legislature of both parties to discuss this?
Yeah,
and what sort of response have you got?
We've socialized this, Deputy Commissioner Thames and myself and others from DCD. We've socialized this extensively on both sides of the aisle, and I would say overwhelmingly there's been a positive response and a desire to work with us and learn more.
And people really like the idea that you get credit for job creation after the job is created. that is a real benefit to taxpayers. So you only get that benefit after you show you've created the job.
Commissioner Westby mentioned the manufacturing pipeline. What about Step Up? The funding is run out for that. Or is that going to be continued? Anybody?
Do you want to take that?
I can try. I don't know if it's going to be continued. That's a big question mark. That was phased out basically last year, so that's my guess is probably not from what I know now.
If Paz, I would just add to that. We are holistically looking at a lot of the programs that did utilize bond funding in the past, where they were funding workforce and other operational expenses. So we're taking a hard look and making sure that those, if we are going to put it on the credit card, that there's a real ROI and benefit given the use.
Is that part of the assessment that the new council is doing?
It's part of the assessment in terms of the needs, yes. How to fund it, how to get it done, general fund versus bonding, that'll be something we deal with.
So how much less in bonding will you be doing with these new incentive programs if they're approved?
So if you look, just Christina, empirically at this past year, it's 140 million. So on average, DECD was doing roughly 200 million across programs per year. If you look at the 3 preceding years, last year it was around 60 or 70 million. So the new program, the Job CT, that will not require bonding. That'll be viewed as a reduction in future new revenue to the state. And then Small Business Express, the expectation is there will be no fiscal impact. We're going to utilize existing resources in the revolving loan fund to target at the communities that Lieutenant Governor Bice was mentioning.
Do you expect to stay in that $60 to $70 million annual range?
As of now, that's right. I think obviously things can change, but the expectation is that type of bonding reduction going forward as well.
Can you talk about ways that you're looking at adjusting upward, especially for small businesses that can't add 25 people, as we talked about, last week in one way that you did? Is that something that you're looking at? You're going to be prepared to act? And secondly, are you looking at incentives, not city versus non-city, but incentives for companies that bring revenue in from the outside, that is, that help the Connecticut economy, versus substitution effect incentives for companies that are here, and if they're not here, it doesn't hurt the economy?
Sure. Let me take those in reverse order, Dan, if that's okay. So on the second question, we are exclusively focused on companies and providing incentives to companies that are importing revenue or exporting their goods and services.
Including in cities?
Including in cities. That's where the benefit's going. For businesses that are captive or operate just within the 4 walls of Connecticut's economy, it's my opinion that there should not be incentives there. Right. We want to be incentivizing the manufacturer, the insurance company that's exporting their products, or the technology company like Galaxy. So that's really where we're focused. We're going to
butcher and baker and all that stuff.
No, the retail or the restaurant example that we've discussed, that I don't think that's an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars. On the first question, in terms of why 25 jobs and not a different number, this comes down to the operational burden of compliance and making sure that we can monitor it appropriately on behalf of taxpayers. As of now, it's still a bit of a manual process. We're seeing if we can make that more efficient. Ideally, that is a number that could come down in the world, because we want to make sure we have a level playing field between smaller businesses and bigger businesses. But it really just comes down to resources and operational efficiency.
David, would you say overall that the First 5 program was unsuccessful, or there were things in it that worked and things that just didn't work, and was risk just unpalatable?
So Susan, that's a stronger statement than I would say unsuccessful. I think the question is, and this is the big question with incentives, as I've researched this a lot over the past 11 months, how much of the business investment would happen anyway? And when you're really trying to, there are studies out there that suggest 50 or even 75% of the job creation investment would happen regardless of incentives. So when you're really putting that probability alongside the cost per job, that's where you can have questions about, does this make sense for the taxpayer that is subsidizing that job or that business? So overall, I think First 5, one of the big benefits, though, is you have some of our most significant companies that are committed to the state as a function of those agreements, and a lot of them have grown jobs considerably, which the supply chains, as Kurt was mentioning, are all benefiting, and there's a significant multiplier effect.
It sounds like this is a bigger approach, not just financial incentives, but Hartford, different components to make it successful.
Yeah, we want, and this goes back to Mark's point, I don't think we're going to be successful. Said differently, incentives don't grow the economy. we need to focus on what does grow the economy. And as I mentioned, it's our cities, it's infrastructure, it's workforce, and it's fiscal stability and tax certainty. If we get those 4 things right, people are going to want to come here and work here. And that's really where we should focus. I think the pitch to companies is, Connecticut has 80 or 90% of the amenities of Boston in terms of vibrancy and livability, but at 50% of the cost right now. We can't just sell ourselves on price or incentives. We need to sell the place as well, and that's where we need to make critical investments. I think we need to wrap it up with that. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Well done.
Good job.
Thank you for listening. Tim, good to be here again. Thank you very much.